A 7-month baby bump, a diamond wedding ring, and an eviction notice served by her husband's mistress in her own multi-million-dollar mansion. This isn't a movie. This was Elena's life. She thought she had it all. The perfect marriage to billionaire tech mogul Julian Croft, a baby on the way, a life of unbelievable luxury. But while she was picking out cribs, he was picking out diamonds for another woman. And on one stormy Tuesday night, the two worlds collided in the most spectacular, soul-crushing way. Stay with us as we unfold the story of how a single evening of betrayal, greed, and delusion led to a morning of shocking regret, and a series of twists no one saw coming. Elena Croft traced the delicate, hand-painted gold leaf on the wallpaper of the nursery. It was a pattern of intertwined willow branches, shimmering under the soft glow of the crystal chandelier. Each detail of the room, from the imported silk rug to the custom-built crib that looked more like a royal chariot, was a testament to her husband Julian's wealth. He was the Julian Croft, the boy genius who had turned a Silicon Valley startup into a global tech empire, Omnicorp. His face was a regular feature on magazine covers, his net worth a subject of constant, odd speculation. And he was her husband, the father of the child growing steadily within her. She was 7 months pregnant, and the weight of it was both a profound joy and a physical burden. Her ankles were perpetually swollen, her back ached, and sleep had become a series of brief, interrupted naps. But every kick, every flutter from within her womb was a reminder of the love that had started it all. She remembered Julian's proposal, not with a grand public gesture, but on a simple, rain-slicked Sunday, surrounded by takeout boxes. He had looked at her, his eyes the color of a stormy sea, wide with a sincerity that had melted her heart. "I don't want to build an empire without my queen," he'd whispered, slipping a simple, elegant diamond onto her finger. The empire was now a realisha sprawling, glittering thing of glass and steel towers, private jets, and mansions like this one, a palatial estate overlooking the San Francisco Bay. But somewhere along the way, the queen had started to feel like a gilded prisoner. Julian was home less and less. His explanations were always plausible: a late-night board meeting, a last-minute flight to Tokyo, a critical server meltdown that required his personal oversight. He would return smelling of expensive cologne and the faint, sterile scent of an airplane cabin, and would apologize with gifts. A Cartier bracelet one week, a vintage Chanel bag the next. Elena would smile, accept the peace offering, and try to ignore the growing chasm between them. She told herself it was the pressure of his work. The Julian she had married was still in there, beneath the tailored suits and the media-trained smile. The man who had once made her laugh until she cried by trying to assemble a piece of IKEA furniture was just busy. The pregnancy, she hoped, would change that. It would bring him back to her, back to the foundations of their life together. But a new name had begun to surface in their conversations, a ghost at their dinner table: Isabelle. Isabelle Dubois. She was Julian's new senior vice president of global strategy, a brilliant, raven-haired woman with a Parisian accent and a Wharton MBA. Julian spoke of her with a detached, professional admiration that somehow felt too rehearsed. "Isabelle is a killer," he'd say, swirling his wine. "Absolutely ruthless in the boardroom. We wouldn't have closed the Axiom deal without her." Elena had met her only once, at a charity gala. Isabelle was breathtaking, exuding a confidence that was almost predatory. She had shaken Elena's hand, her grip firm, her smile a flash of perfect white teeth. "It is a pleasure to finally meet the woman who holds Julian's heart," she had purred, her eyes lingering on Elena's swollen belly for a fraction of a second too long. It was a look that wasn't congratulatory. It was assessing, calculating. Elena had felt a chill crawl up her spine, a primal instinct she couldn't articulate. The texts were the next sign. Late-night messages that would make Julian's phone buzz on the nightstand. He would glance at the screen, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, and then quickly type a reply, his thumbs a blur. If Elena asked, he would brush it off. Just Isabelle, finalizing the presentation for the morning. He made it sound like a chore, but his focus was absolute, his attention completely stolen. The distance grew. Intimate dinners were replaced by Julian eating a hasty meal in his study. Conversations about their future, about the baby, were cut short by urgent phone calls. Elena found herself spending more and more time alone in the cavernous mansion, her only companions the silent, deferential staff and the rhythmic beat of her own anxious heart. She was living the dream life, a fairy tale of wealth and privilege, but she had never felt more alone. The gilded cage, she was beginning to realize, was still a cage. And she was trapped inside, watching her fairy tale slowly, insidiously turn into a nightmare. She didn't know it yet, but the architect of that nightmare was about to knock on her door. The Tuesday it all shattered began like any other lonely day. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the mansion, the sky a bruised purple over the churning waters of the bay. Julian had called that morning, his voice distant and tinny from the speakerphone. He was in London, a last-minute trip. A merger was on the verge of collapse. He was sorry, he loved her, and he'd be home as soon as he could. He hadn't mentioned that the London office of Omnicorp had a direct video feed to his San Francisco study. He also hadn't mentioned that his private jet had never left the tarmac. Elena had spent the afternoon in the nursery, arranging and rearranging tiny onesies, the soft fabric a small comfort against her growing unease. She tried to read, but the words swam before her eyes. She tried to watch a movie, but the cheerful, uncomplicated lives of the characters felt like a mockery. By evening, the storm had intensified, the wind howling like a wounded animal. The staff had retired to their quarters, leaving Elena alone in the echoing silence of the main house. She was making herself a cup of chamomile tea in the kitchen when the doorbell chimed, its melodic four-note tone jarring against the fury of the storm. She frowned. They weren't expecting anyone. Julian had his own key. Perhaps it was a delivery, though it was late for that. Waddling to the grand, carved oak doors, she peered through the peephole. Standing on the marble steps, illuminated by the porch light, was Isabelle Dubois. She was holding a sleek black umbrella that seemed to be losing its battle with the wind. Her designer trench coat was soaked at the hem, but her hair and makeup were impossibly perfect. A knot of dread tightened in Elena's stomach. What is she doing here? With a trembling hand, Elena opened the door. Isabelle? Is everything all right? Is it Julian? Isabelle's smile was thin, devoid of any warmth. She stepped inside, uninvited, shaking her umbrella and leaving a puddle of water on the pristine travertine floor. Julian is fine, she said, her voice smooth as silk, the French accent more pronounced than Elena remembered. He's just occupied. She strolled into the grand foyer, her heels clicking an arrogant rhythm on the stone. She took in the soaring ceilings, the sweeping staircase, the priceless art on the walls, her eyes gleaming with an avaricious light. This wasn't the look of a guest. It was the look of an appraiser, or a conqueror. I'm sorry, I don't understand, Elena said, her hand instinctively going to her belly. Why are you here? Isabelle turned her gaze, finally settling on Elena, sharp and dismissive. I'm here to make the transition as smooth as possible. Transition? Elena's heart began to hammer against her ribs. The transition, Isabelle repeated, as if speaking to a particularly slow child, of you out, and me in. She let the words hang in the air, each one a poison dart. She began to walk around the foyer, trailing a manicured finger along a marble-topped console table. Julian and I have been together for months. This arrangement, she gestured vaguely at Elena's pregnant form, was a mistake. A loose end he didn't know how to tie up. He's too sentimental, you see. Too soft. He can't stand to see a woman cry. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. The tea she had been looking forward to churned in her stomach. That's not true. You're lying. Isabelle let out a short, sharp laugh. Am I? Julian is a creature of efficiency, Elena. And this marriage has become inefficient. He needs a partner, not a dependent. He needs someone who can stand beside him in the boardroom, not someone waiting at home to have her hand held. She stopped in front of a large, gilt-framed portrait of Elena and Julian taken on their wedding day. They were smiling, radiant with happiness. Isabelle stared at it for a moment, her expression turning to one of pure contempt. This was a lovely fantasy. But it's over. The words were a physical blow. Elena staggered back, her hand gripping the newel post at the base of the stairs for support. "Get out," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Get out of my house." "Your house." Isabelle's laugh was louder this time, a brittle, ugly sound. "Oh, darling, you really don't get it, do you? You are a guest here, and your stay is over." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a sheath of papers. "Julian has been very generous. A settlement, more than enough for you and the baby to live comfortably somewhere else. You can sign them now, or you can make this difficult. But either way, you will be leaving. Tonight." Tears were streaming down Elena's face now, hot and shameful. This couldn't be happening. It was a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by the storm and her own anxiety. Julian would never. He couldn't. He wouldn't do this, she sobbed. "He loves me." "He loves the idea of you," Isabelle corrected, her voice turning cold and hard. "The idea of the perfect, placid little wife. But it's a bore. I challenge him. I excite him. We are equals." She took a step closer, her eyes glittering with malice. "He's with me right now, you know. In his study. He just couldn't bear to be here for the unpleasantness." It was that final, cruel detail that broke something inside Elena. The image of Julian, her Julian, cowering in his office just a few dozen feet away while this woman dismantled their life was too much to bear. A wave of fury, primal and protective, surged through her. "I said get out," she screamed, her voice a roar of pain and rage. Isabelle's mask of civility finally dropped, her face contorting into a snarl. "You foolish little girl. You have nothing. You are nothing without him. I am the future of this company, of this family. Now, you will pack a bag and you will leave, or I will have security remove you. This is my home." Elena cried, her body trembling uncontrollably. "I am his wife. I am carrying his child." "You are an inconvenience," Isabelle spat, taking another step forward until she was inches from Elena's face. "And I am very, very good at removing inconveniences." In that moment, as the storm raged outside and a different, more vicious storm erupted within the walls of her home, Elena understood. This wasn't just an affair. This was a coup. And Isabelle wasn't just a mistress, she was an invader, and she would not stop until she had taken everything. The standoff in the foyer felt like an eternity. Elena and Isabelle, two women locked in a silent, ferocious battle of wills, the air crackling with hatred. Elena's mind raced, a chaotic whirlwind of disbelief and terror. Julian was in his study. He was here. He was letting this happen. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it was like a physical void opening up inside her. "He won't even face me," Elena's voice was barely a whisper, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a hollow, aching sorrow. Isabelle's smile returned, smug and victorious. "He knew you would be emotional. It's better this way. Cleaner." She gestured with the settlement papers. "Sign them, Elena. Take the money. It's the last thing he'll ever give you." But Elena wasn't looking at the papers. She was looking past Isabelle, up the sweeping staircase. She thought of the nursery, the willow branches shimmering on the walls, the tiny clothes folded in the drawers. A fierce, protective instinct, stronger than any pain or fear, rose within her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her child. Her child would not be born into this venom, this poison. Her child would not be a bargaining chip in a settlement. With a resolve she didn't know she possessed, Elena turned her back on Isabelle. She ignored the sputtered, indignant protest. She walked, her steps slow but steady, towards the back of the mansion, towards the staff entrance and the garage beyond. "Where do you think you're going?" Isabelle demanded, her voice sharp with annoyance. "We are not finished here." Elena didn't answer. She didn't look back. Every ounce of her being was focused on one single, desperate goal: escape. She could feel Isabelle's eyes burning into her back, but she didn't care. The mansion, once a symbol of her dreams, now felt like a tomb. The air was thick with lies, the beautiful objects tainted by betrayal. She fumbled with the locks on the heavy service door, her hands shaking so badly it took her 3 tries to get it open. The wind and rain hit her with force, whipping her hair across her face and soaking her thin silk blouse in an instant. She didn't have a coat. She didn't have her purse. She didn't have anything but the clothes on her back and the life inside her. The garage was a cavernous space filled with Julian's collection of luxury cars. A Bentley, a vintage Porsche, a ridiculously oversized SUV. Her own modest hybrid, a car she'd insisted on keeping from her old life, was tucked away in the corner. The keys, thank God, were in the small dish by the door where she always left them. As she slid into the driver's seat, the cold leather shocking her skin, she could hear the main door to the garage being thrown open. Isabelle stood there, silhouetted against the light from the house, her face a mask of fury. "You can't just leave," she shrieked over the howl of the wind. "You have to sign the papers." Elena didn't hesitate. She jammed the key into the ignition, the engine humming to life with a quiet, reassuring sound. She slammed the car into reverse, not even bothering to close the driver's side door. The car shot backwards out of the garage. Isabelle had to leap out of the way, letting out a curse as the spray from the tires splattered her perfect trench coat with mud. Elena swung the car around, her heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against her ribs. Through the rain-streaked windshield, she saw the lights of the main house, the lights of Julian's study window. For a fleeting, agonizing moment, she thought she saw a shadow move behind the curtain, a figure watching her go. Was it him? Was he watching his pregnant wife flee into a storm with nothing? The thought was a fresh stab of pain so sharp it made her gasp. She pressed her foot down on the accelerator, the tires squealing on the wet asphalt of the driveway. She didn't know where she was going. She had no plan, no destination. There was only one imperative: away. Away from the lies, away from the woman who had stolen her life, and away from the man who had let her do it. As she drove through the grand, wrought iron gates of the estate, leaving the gilded cage behind her, the tears finally came. They were not the soft, sorrowful tears of before, but hot, angry, silent tears of a woman who had just lost everything. Or so she thought. In reality, she was driving away from the wreckage, and in doing so, she was saving the one thing that truly mattered. Julian Croft woke to the unfamiliar silence of his own house. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, the morning sun glinting off the damp leaves outside his bedroom window. He rolled over, his hand reaching for the other side of the king-sized bed. It was empty. The sheets were cold. A vague, sludgy unease coated his mind, the remnants of a night fueled by too much expensive whiskey and the intoxicating, venomous whispers of Isabelle. He sat up, his head pounding. Fragments of the previous evening came back to him in jagged, unpleasant shards. Isabelle's voice, a triumphant purr. The sight of her in his foyer, a conqueror claiming her prize. The shouting, Elena's cry of anguish, a sound that had pierced even the thick, soundproofed walls of his study. He had stayed in the study, just as Isabelle had instructed. "Let me handle it, Julian," she had said, her hand cool on his cheek. "It will be a clean break, less drama." But it hadn't felt clean. It had felt sordid. He had sat there, the billionaire titan of industry, hiding in his own office like a coward while his life was being dismantled outside the door. He had told himself it was for the best. Elena was a good woman, a sweet woman, but she didn't fit into his world anymore. She was from his past, a relic of a simpler life. Isabelle was his future. She was sharp, ambitious, a reflection of his own ruthless drive. She understood the sacrifices required for greatness. Or so he had convinced himself, repeating the justifications like a mantra, the words tasting more like ash with each repetition. He remembered watching from his window as Elena's small car sped down the driveway, a tiny, fleeing vessel in the vast, stormy night. He had felt a pang of something guilt, loss. But Isabelle had been there, refilling his glass, her lips on his, whispering promises of a future unburdened by sentiment. They had ended up in his bed, their coupling a desperate, almost violent act that had left him feeling hollowed out, not triumphant. Now, in the clear, unforgiving light of morning, the hollowness had expanded into a vast, echoing chasm of regret. The smell of Isabelle's perfume, cloying and foreign, clung to his sheets. A wave of revulsion washed over him. What had he done? He threw back the covers and walked barefoot through the silent mansion. The puddle of water Isabelle had left in the foyer had been cleaned up by the staff, but he could still see it in his mind's eye. He saw the scene as if he had been there, Isabelle's smug arrogance, the legal papers held out like a weapon, and Elena, pregnant, alone, terrified. He pushed open the door to the nursery. The room was pristine, peaceful. The morning sun illuminated the golden willow branches on the walls, making them glow. A small stuffed elephant lay on the silk rug, as if dropped in a hurry. He picked it up, the soft toy feeling absurdly heavy in his hand. He had promised Elena he would be there. He had promised to build a family with her. He had pictured himself in this room, holding his child, his son or daughter. He had pictured Elena's smile, the one that had always made him feel like he could conquer the world. And he had thrown it all away. For what? For a partner who saw his life as a hostile takeover. The justifications from the night before now seemed like the pathetic ramblings of a drunken fool. He hadn't been making a strategic decision. He had been manipulated. His ego stroked, his weaknesses exploited by a master predator. Isabelle hadn't just seduced him, she had played him. And in his arrogance, in his vanity, he had let her. A frantic, clawing panic began to rise in his chest. He had to find her. He had to fix this. He stumbled back to his bedroom, grabbing his phone. He dialed Elena's number. It went straight to voicemail, her cheerful recorded voice a ghost from a life he had just annihilated. He tried again and again. Voicemail. He called his head of security, a former Mossad agent named Avi. Find my wife, he barked into the phone, his voice tight with desperation. Find Elena. I don't care what it takes. Use every resource we have. Track her car, her phone, her credit cards. I need to know where she is. Now. He hung up and sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. The image of Elena's face, pale and tear-streaked, swam before his eyes. He had done this. He had broken the one pure, good thing in his life. He was Julian Croft, the man who had everything. But in the stark, silent light of that morning, he realized he had just willingly, stupidly given away his entire world. The regret was a physical thing, a crushing weight on his soul. And he had a sickening feeling that this was only the beginning of his penance. Finding her would be the easy part. Earning back her trust, if that was even possible, might just be the one deal he would never be able to close. For 3 days, there was nothing. A terrifying digital silence. Elena hadn't used her credit cards. Her phone remained off. The tracker on her car had been disabled somewhere in a gritty industrial part of Oakland. The car itself was found abandoned in a public parking garage, wiped clean of fingerprints. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. Julian was a man possessed. He barely slept, existing on a diet of black coffee and raw fear. He had thrown Isabelle out of his house and his life in a single, rage-fueled phone call, her sputtered threats and manipulations turning his stomach. You will regret this, Julian, she had hissed. I can ruin you. He had simply hung up and instructed his legal team to prepare for war. But the battle with Isabelle was a sideshow. The only thing that mattered was finding Elena. He had converted his study into a command center, maps of the Bay Area spread across his desk, Avi providing grim hourly updates that all said the same thing, no leads. The police had been notified, a discreet missing persons report filed, but Julian knew Elena. She wasn't missing in the conventional sense. She was hiding from him. On the fourth day, a letter arrived. It wasn't delivered by courier or mail but was left on the front steps of the mansion, propped against a stone planter. It was a simple white envelope with his name written on it in Elena's elegant, familiar script. His hands trembled as he tore it open. Inside was not a letter, but a single folded document. It was a sonogram photo, a recent one. At the top, in the same neat handwriting, were the words, "It's a girl." Tucked behind the photo was a small, silver key. He recognized it instantly. It was the key to a safe deposit box they had opened together years ago at a small, independent bank in Sausalito. They had intended to store their important documents there, marriage license, passports, his will. He had forgotten all about it. It was under her name, Elena presenting her driver's license with her maiden name, a detail that at the time seemed insignificant. Now, it felt like a premonition. He was in his car in minutes, the sonogram photo on the passenger seat, a silent, heartbreaking accusation. It's a girl. A daughter he might never know. A daughter whose mother he had driven away. The bank was a quiet, unassuming building on a tree-lined street. The manager, a kindly-looking older woman, recognized the key and, after a perfunctory check of a signature card Elena had apparently left on file, led him into the vault. The box was heavy. He took it to a private viewing room, his heart pounding a nervous, erratic rhythm. He lifted the lid. On top lay her wedding and engagement rings, the diamonds catching the light, looking cold and lifeless. Beneath them were several thick manila envelopes. The first one he opened contained copies of the settlement papers Isabelle had tried to force on her. Scrolled across the front in red ink was a single word, void. The second envelope was thicker. He slid out its contents, his breath catching in his throat. It was a dossier, a meticulously compiled collection of documents, emails, and financial records. It was a complete, irrefutable record of Isabelle Dubois's corporate espionage. For the past year, she had been systematically leaking Omnicorp's proprietary data, product prototypes, marketing strategies, and confidential financial projections to their biggest competitor, a ruthless German tech conglomerate called Vanguard Industries. The dossier contained encrypted emails between Isabelle and a senior executive at Vanguard, offshore bank statements showing massive payments into an account under a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, and even transcripts of secretly recorded conversations. It was a betrayal of staggering proportions, one that made his own personal betrayal of Elena seem almost trivial in comparison. This wasn't just about stealing a husband, it was about destroying an empire. He leafed through the pages, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The Axiom deal, the one Julian had praised Isabelle for closing the documents, showed she had intentionally overpaid by nearly $200 million, with a significant portion of that overpayment being kicked back directly to her. She hadn't just been stealing from him, she had been using his own company as her personal piggy bank, all while plotting its demise. But how? How had Elena, his quiet, unassuming wife, who he thought was only interested in art history and charity work, uncovered all of this? The answer was in the final envelope. It contained a single sheet of paper, a letter addressed to him. Julian. I imagine by now you have found the contents of this box. I imagine you are shocked. You probably thought I spent my days shopping and planning luncheons. You underestimated me. You both did. I started looking into Isabelle 6 months ago. It was a gut feeling at first. The way you spoke about her, the way she looked at me. So, I did what you taught me to do best, I gathered data. I hired a private investigator, a very good one from my father's old law firm. You always forgot to mention that your sentimental wife was the daughter of one of New York's most tenacious corporate lawyers. He taught me to always look for the fine print. What we found was worse than I could have ever imagined. It was never about love, Julian. It was a business transaction. Seduce the CEO, gain his trust, and bleed his company dry from the inside. You were just a mark. A very rich, very arrogant, and very easy mark. I was going to give this to you. I was going to save you and your company. I was waiting for the right moment. I thought this baby, our baby, would be that momentous chance for us to start over, to be a real family, free of her. But you made your choice that night. You chose the viper over your wife and your unborn child. So now you have another choice to make. The dossier is a copy. The original, along with a sworn affidavit from me detailing everything I know, is with my lawyer. It is also in the hands of a certain investigative reporter at the Wall Street Journal, with instructions to publish if anything should happen to me. What you do with this information is up to you. You can try to bury it, protect the company's stock price, and in doing so, protect her. Or you can do the right thing. You can expose her, save your company from the cancer she represents, and face the consequences. The choice is yours. Do not try to find me. I will not be found. When I feel that I am safe, and when I know that you have done the right thing, perhaps I will let you see your daughter. But our life together, the one we dreamed of, is over. You destroyed that. Now go and save what's left of your empire. Elena. Julian let the letter fall from his numb fingers. He stared at the wall of the small, sterile room, the world tilting on its axis. He had been a fool. A blind, arrogant fool. Elena hadn't just been his wife, she had been his guardian angel, working in the shadows to protect him while he was gallivanting with the very person trying to destroy him. The twist of the knife was brutal. She hadn't just left him. She had left him with an impossible choice, a test of his character. And in doing so, she had seized all the power. He was no longer the billionaire mogul in control of his destiny. He was a man humbled, broken, and utterly at the mercy of the woman he had so carelessly thrown away. The regret from that morning was nothing compared to the tidal wave of shame and self-loathing that consumed him now. He had lost his wife, his daughter, and he was on the verge of losing his company. And it was all his own damn fault. The aftermath of the revelation in the safe deposit box was a controlled detonation. Julian Croft, the impulsive titan, was replaced by a cold, calculating strategist. The shame and regret were still there, a constant, burning fire in his gut, but he channeled them into a singular, focused rage. He was no longer just fighting to save his company, he was fighting to prove to Elena, wherever she was, that he was worthy of the test she had given him. His first call was not to his lawyers or his board, but to Avi. The investigation is over, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Stop looking for Elena. She is safe. But I have a new target for you. I want you to find the private investigator she hired. I want to know everything. His second call was to the chairman of the Omnicorp board, a grizzled, old-school industrialist named Marcus Thorne. He summoned an emergency, confidential board meeting for the following morning, offering no explanation, simply stating that the future of the company was at stake. That night, Julian didn't sleep. He sat in his study, the dossier spread out before him, cross-referencing every detail, every date, every transaction. He saw the pattern now, the subtle sabotage, the unlucky project failures, the brilliant deals that were actually Trojan horses. Isabelle hadn't just been bleeding the company, she had been strategically weakening it, setting it up for a hostile takeover by Vanguard. And he, the celebrated genius, had been her willing accomplice, blinded by her flattery and his own ego. The emergency board meeting was held in a sterile, windowless conference room in the heart of Omnicorp Tower. The air was thick with tension and curiosity. Julian walked in, looking haggard but resolute, and placed a copy of the dossier in front of each of the 12 board members. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and clear. "For the past year, we have been the victims of a sophisticated and devastating campaign of corporate espionage, orchestrated from within this very company by our Senior Vice President of Global Strategy, Isabelle Dubois. For the next 2 hours, he laid it all out. He didn't spare himself. He detailed his personal relationship with Isabelle, admitting his own catastrophic failure of judgment. He presented the evidence with a detached, brutal honesty that left the room in stunned silence. There were no excuses, no attempts to mitigate his own culpability. He owned his failure completely. When he was finished, the room was quiet. The board members, titans of finance and industry, looked from the damning evidence in their hands to the humbled man standing before them. Finally, Marcus Thorne spoke, his voice a low rumble. "What do you propose we do, Julian?" "We go public," Julian said without hesitation. "We take the entire story to the Wall Street Journal reporter my wife has already contacted. We control the narrative. We expose Isabelle. We expose Vanguard. And we file the largest corporate espionage lawsuit in history. The stock will take a massive hit. There will be chaos. But we cut out the cancer, and we survive. The alternative is to let Vanguard bleed us dry and pick up the pieces for pennies on the dollar." It was a high-stakes gamble, but it was the only move they had. After a tense hour of deliberation, the board agreed. They would fight. The moment the decision was made, Julian's legal team, acting on his prearranged instructions, descended. They filed restraining orders, froze Isabelle's assets, and initiated termination proceedings. Federal agents, alerted by Julian's lawyers, raided Isabelle's penthouse apartment, seizing computers and documents. It was swift, brutal, and decisive. Isabelle, who had been arrogantly assuming Julian would have to crawl back to her to keep the scandal quiet, was caught completely off guard. She was apprehended by FBI agents while trying to board a private jet to Geneva. Her public image, so carefully curated, shattered in an instant. The raven-haired Wharton genius was now a perp-walked felon in handcuffs, her face a mask of shocked fury on every news channel. The Wall Street Journal story broke the next morning. It was an explosive, front-page exposé that sent shockwaves through the financial world. Omnicorp stock plummeted, just as Julian had predicted. But something else happened. The story, as framed by the reporter and guided by the narrative Julian had provided, was not just about corporate greed. It was a story of betrayal and redemption. It painted Julian not as a fool, but as a man who had made a terrible mistake and was now risking everything to make it right. It mentioned, discreetly, the role his estranged wife had played in uncovering the plot, casting her as a mysterious, heroic figure. The fallout was immense. Vanguard Industries, exposed and disgraced, saw its own stock crumble. Lawsuits and federal investigations were launched on both sides of the Atlantic. The world Julian had built was in chaos. He was besieged by reporters, by lawyers, by panicked investors. He worked around the clock, holding press conferences, reassuring his employees, and fighting to stabilize the company he had almost lost. Through it all, he was driven by one singular hope. He was doing what Elena had asked. He was facing the consequences. He was doing the right thing. And every night, in the hollow silence of his empty mansion, he would look at the sonogram photo of the daughter he had never met and pray that somewhere, Elena was watching. He had passed her test. He had saved his empire. But the reckoning for his soul was far from over. He still had to win back his family. Years passed. Years that Julian spent not just rebuilding his company, but rebuilding himself. The divorce was finalized, a quiet, somber affair. The parenting plan became his Bible, every clause followed with meticulous devotion. He learned to be a father not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of presence. He was there for the first steps, the first words, the first day of preschool, always on Elena's terms, always earning the privilege. The mansion was sold. He moved into a smaller, though still luxurious, house closer to the city, a space that didn't echo with so many ghosts. The nursery furniture, the royal chariot crib and the silk rug, he had carefully placed in storage, a monument to a past he could never forget but was determined to learn from. The signal of a true shift came on a bright Saturday afternoon, 5 years after that stormy night. Julian wasn't in a boardroom. He was standing on the sidelines of a children's soccer field, a paper cup of lukewarm coffee in his hand. His daughter, Lily, a vibrant little girl with his stormy eyes and Elena's determined spirit, was chasing the ball with fierce concentration. He saw Elena arrive a few minutes later. She looked radiant, at peace. The guarded strength was still there, but it was softer now, woven with a quiet confidence. She had built a new life for herself, a successful art consultancy, and a home filled with warmth and love, not just expensive things. She came and stood beside him, a comfortable silence settling between them. "She's getting good," Julian said, a proud smile on his face as Lily scored a goal. "She gets her ruthless streak from her mother," Elena replied, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips. It was a shared joke, a sign of the new foundation they had built, one of respect, co-parenting, and a deep, abiding care for the daughter they both adored. "Reminds me of a time you tried to assemble some IKEA furniture," he ventured, his voice soft. Elena laughed, a real, warm laugh that reached her eyes. "You were a disaster. I think I have more faith in Lily building a rocket ship than you building that bookshelf." They stood there for the rest of the game, two parents cheering for their child. Not a king and his discarded queen, but partners in the most important venture of their lives. The pain of the past hadn't vanished, but it had transformed. It was a scar, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the high cost of arrogance. As the game ended and Lily ran into their arms, a sweaty, triumphant little champion, Julian looked at Elena over their daughter's head. He knew her love was something he could never reclaim, and he accepted that. But in its place, he had earned something just as precious, her respect. They had lost an empire built on wealth and ego, but together, as a different kind of family, they were building a new one founded on forgiveness, resilience, and the unconditional love for their daughter. And for the first time in a very long time, Julian Croft felt truly rich. What an incredible journey of heartbreak, resilience, and hard-won redemption. Elena's story shows us that true strength isn't about the life you're given, but the one you build from the ashes. What did you think of Julian's path to redemption? Do you believe Elena made the right choice to let him into their daughter's life? We'd love to hear your take on this complex story, so please share your thoughts in the comments below. Truly read every single one. If you were captivated by this real-life drama and want more stories that explore the depths of human emotion and resilience, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves a powerful story, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what we have in store for you next.